Remember when Caitlin Clark was getting pushed around on the court soaking up all those flagrant fouls? Well, those days are over, folks. The Indiana Fever just signed not one, but two enforcers to watch Clark's back. The closest thing they had was Erica Weeder. The closest thing they had with someone to defend Caitlin Clark was Erica freaking Weeder. Maybe Tammy. But Caitlin Clark was getting hit a lot. She was getting hit a lot early and they needed their trials Oakley. Natasha Howard and Sophie Cunningham are coming to town. And they're not here to make friends with Clark's bullies. These two are bringing a whole new level of toughness. Clark's bullies are about to learn some hard lessons and they've been put on notice. Want to know how these two are going to transform the Fever and defend Caitlin Clark? Let's go. Picture this. Caitlin Clark, the basketball sensation we've all been waiting for, steps onto the WNBA court for her rookie season. The crowd's buzzing, expectations are sky high, and everyone's ready to see her light it up. But instead of a warm welcome, what does she get? Elbows, shoves, and some seriously dirty plays. What's going on here? That's all I see. They try so long to get respect for women's basketball and then they treat it like a junior high school girl's locker room. Junior high school girl antics on the court. Let's break it down, because this isn't just your average case of a rookie welcome. Clark faced a barrage of physical play last season that went way beyond normal competition. We're talking hard fouls, cheap shots, and moves that had no business being on a basketball court. It was like watching a wrestling match break out in the middle of a game. But here's where it gets wild. Clark wasn't just getting knocked around. She was a target. The stats don't lie, folks, and they're painting a pretty ugly picture. Are you ready for this? A whopping 17% of all flagrant fouls in the league were against Clark. That's not just bad luck or coincidence, that's a bullseye on her back. And guess who was leading the charge in this not-so-friendly welcome wagon? The Chicago Sky. They were responsible for 80% of those flagrant fouls against Clark. Talk about holding a grudge. It's like they took one look at her talent and decided, nope, we can't have that. But why? Was it jealousy, fear, or just plain old-fashioned bullying? Whatever the reason, it was clear that some players in the league weren't ready to roll out the red carpet for the new star on the block. Feel like I'm getting hammered. One of the most shocking moments came courtesy of Diamond DeShields from the Chicago Sky. Picture this. Clark's driving to the basket, focused on making a play, when bam. DeShields sends her flying to the ground. The crowd goes silent. Everyone's holding their breath, wondering if Clark's going to get up. It was the kind of hit that had fans and commentators alike calling for someone to get tossed. But Clark? She picked herself up, dusted herself off, and got right back to work. That's the thing about Clark. She's got ice in her veins. While everyone else was losing their minds over the rough treatment, Clark kept her cool. She didn't back down, didn't let it shake her game. After a particularly nasty foul from Kennedy Carter, all Clark had to say was, "That's just not a basketball play, but gotta play through it." Talk about mental toughness. While Clark is resilient, the front office knew they had to bring in reinforcements, and they sure did during the off-season. So, who are these enforcers we are talking about, and how can they change the landscape of the team? Let's talk about the game changer that just walked into the Indiana Fever's locker room. Natasha Howard, folks. This isn't just any player. We're looking at a 3-time WNBA champion, an all-star, and a former Defensive Player of the Year. Howard's not here to play games. Well, she is, but you know what I mean. She's here to send a message. Remember how Clark was getting pushed around last season? Well, those days are over. Howard's arrival is like the Fever saying, enough is enough. She's not just bringing her skills, she's bringing a reputation that'll make bullies think twice before messing with Clark. Picture this. Howard standing next to Clark on the court. Suddenly those opponents who thought they could rough up the rookie don't look so tough anymore, do they? Howard's been through the wars. She knows what it's like to fight her way to the top. Now, she's ready to fight for Clark. But all of that, and we haven't yet touched upon what Howard does best. Defend. Howard was named Defensive Player of the Year in 2019 and has finished in the top 10 of the Defensive Player of the Year voting 3 times in her career. Howard has averaged at least 1 block and 1 steal per game in each of her last 7 seasons, and that versatility is really what makes her a weapon on defense. But here's where it gets really interesting. Howard isn't just muscle. She's a versatile weapon that's going to change the whole game for the Fever. Last season she averaged 17.6 points, 6.7 rebounds, and 2.9 assists per game. That's not just good, that's all-star level performance. And get this, she can shoot threes too. Imagine the space that's going to create for Clark, Kelsey Mitchell, and Aaliyah Boston in the paint. Last season, with a minimum of 25 games played, Natasha Howard was one of just 13 players to average 18 points per game. She was one of 16 players to average 7 rebounds per game. And the list of players to average both 18 and 7 last year, shorts and elite. Asia Wilson, Breanna Stewart, Napheesa Collier, Brittany Griner, and yes, Natasha Howard. Now, let's talk defense. Howard didn't win Defensive Player of the Year in 2019 by accident. She's a force to be reckoned with. Her frame and aggressive play style, that's going to make opponents think twice before driving to the hoop. And when it comes to protecting Clark, well, let's just say Howard's got a history of standing up for her teammates. But that's not all. Howard brings something else the Fever desperately needs. Playoff experience. We're talking over 50 playoff games under her belt. That's the kind of leadership that can transform a young team like the Fever from underdogs to contenders. Are you ready for this? Howard's excited too. In her own words, "I'm excited to return to Indiana and bring my experience and toughness to the team. I want to help Caitlin and the Fever compete at the highest level." That's not just talk. That's a champion ready to make things happen. Here's the deal. Howard knows what it's like to be the underdog. She's fought her way to the top, and now she's ready to help Clark do the same. It's not just about protecting Clark from bullies. It's about showing her how to dominate the game at the highest level. Caitlin Clark was getting hit a lot. She was getting hit a lot early, and they needed their Charles Oakley. You've got that in Sophie Cunningham. Just when you thought the Fever were done making moves, they pulled another ace from their sleeve. Sophie Cunningham is coming to town, and she's here to put the bullies in their place. She will shake things up and make sure Caitlin Clark can focus on what she does best, dominating the game. Now, you might be thinking, Sophie who? Let me tell you, this woman is a force to be reckoned with. A sharpshooter with a mean streak. Exactly what the doctor ordered for the Fever. And get this, the Fever traded away Nalissa Smith and the 8th pick in the 2025 draft to get her. Sounds crazy, right? Wrong. It's pure genius. Sophie Cunningham, in general, is just wild. Wild is the best word I could use to describe Sophie Cunningham. It is just, it's carnage. It's carnage a lot of time when Sophie Cunningham gets involved with anything. He made the fights that Sophie Cunningham has been involved in is mental. Cunningham isn't just tough. She can shoot. We're talking 37.8% from three-point range last season. That's not just good, that's elite. Picture this, Cunningham and Clark, side by side. One's a sharpshooter, the other's a playmaker. And both of them, tough as nails. But there's more to Cunningham than just her shooting skills. Remember the All-Star game, when everyone thought Cunningham was recruiting Clark to Phoenix? Turns out it might have been the other way around. Clark knew exactly what she needed. A teammate who could not only stretch the floor, but also had her back when things got rough. Like Sophie Cunningham, there are so many things where it's like, part of it her fault, part of it not her fault, but she will not back down. She will not back down under any circumstances from anything. And that is what the Indiana Fever need. If somebody hits Caitlin Clark, if somebody does what Victoria Vivians did to Caitlin Clark, it's not going to be Caitlin Clark that's getting involved to be teed up. Sophie Cunningham's in there. You take the technical foul. You take it, and rough is something Cunningham knows all about. This woman is a Taekwondo black belt. Yeah, you heard that right. Since she was 6 years old. Think anyone's going to mess with her on the court? Not likely. Spicy Sophie is the kind of fire the Fever need. But here's what really sets Cunningham apart. She's not just about the physical play, she's got that mental toughness that can't be taught. After taking hard hits during games, she gets right back up and keeps playing. That's the kind of resilience that can change the entire culture of a team. She takes a hard hit and goes down, obviously, gets back up and just laughs. Like that's a legitimate thing where you're like, okay, yeah, this is a person who is just, there is a toughness there with Sophie Cunningham. She's not scared. Now, let's talk about what this means for the Fever. With Cunningham on board, they've got a versatile wing who can score, defend, and isn't afraid to mix it up when needed. She averaged 8.4 points, 3.9 rebounds, and 2.0 assists per game last season. Those might not be all-star numbers, but they're exactly what the Fever need to complement Clark and Kelsey Mitchell. And let's not forget about the space Cunningham's shooting creates. With her ability to knock down threes, defenses can't collapse on Clark, Mitchell, or Aaliyah Boston. That's going to open up the entire offense and make the Fever a nightmare to defend. So yeah, a solid signing for what she does on the floor. But be protecting Caitlin Clark type thing. But the real question on everyone's mind is this: how will Cunningham's aggressive style mesh with Clark's finesse? Will her fiery attitude be the spark that ignites the Fever's championship run, or will it burn too hot? Alright folks, let's talk about the price of protection. You might be thinking, this all sounds great, but what did it cost? The Fever said goodbye to Natasha Smith and their 8th pick in the draft. Now, that might sound like a lot, but here's the truth. Sometimes you've got to give up something to gain something bigger. Remember when Natasha Smith was the golden child? The number 2 pick with all the potential in the world? Well, turns out potential doesn't always turn into performance. Let's look at the numbers because they don't lie. Smith's stats took a nosedive last season. We're talking a drop from 13.5 points per game in her rookie year to just 10.6 last season. That's not progress, folks. That's a problem. And it wasn't just offense where Smith was struggling. She became a liability on defense too. Her lack of speed was like watching molasses try to catch a cheetah. And don't even get me started on her free throw shooting. It was painful to watch, and it was holding the team back. Now, about that 8th pick. Sure, it sounds valuable on paper, but here's the reality check. How many 8th picks in WNBA history have made an immediate impact? Oh wait, not many, right? The Fever are in win-now mode. They don't have time to wait for a rookie to maybe become good in a few years. They need players who can step on the court and make a difference right now. The Fever still have cap space for one more big move. That's right, they're not done yet. They've got their eyes on the prize, and they're not afraid to make bold moves to get there. So what does all this mean for the Fever? By trading Natasha Smith and the 8th pick, they've addressed their immediate needs without sacrificing their long-term potential. They've got proven talent in Howard and Cunningham, players who can make an impact from day one. And they've still got room to make another splash. Picture this: a Fever team with Clark running the point, Howard dominating the paint, and Cunningham stretching the floor. That's not just a team, that's a nightmare for opponents. And the best part? They're built to win now and in the future. But here's the million-dollar question. How will all these new pieces fit together? We've seen Sophie Cunningham's fiery attitude light up the court, but the key to the Fever's success lies in the chemistry between her and Caitlin Clark. How will these two powerhouses blend their styles? It's like mixing fire and ice. Will it create steam or will it fizzle out? The Indiana Fever just pulled off the heist of the century, folks. They've gone from underdogs to potential champions overnight. Clark's bullies, they're on notice. The days of pushing her around are over. The Fever aren't just building a team, they're creating a dynasty. Get ready, WNBA. The Fever are coming, and they're bringing the heat. With Clark at the helm, Howard and Cunningham watching her back, and a roster built to dominate, this team is set to take the league by storm. The bullies who thought they could rough up Clark, they're about to learn a hard lesson. The Fever are here to win, and they're not messing around.